The War Council chamber stank of sulfur and overconfidence, which, in my opinion, was a terrible combination. I'd been serving as diplomatic observer for the Galactic Coalition for 17 cycles now, and I'd learned one universal truth. When powerful species start flexing their mandibles and clicking their claws, someone's about to make a catastrophically stupid decision. Today's catastrophically stupid decision was brought to you by the Predator Lords of Krell'thax, a species that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a battle tank and given it anger management issues. The human settlement on Dust Rim 4 must be eliminated, declared War Master Krell'vor, his 6 eyes gleaming with what I can only describe as aggressive enthusiasm. His blade arms scraped against the stone floor, producing a sound that made my sensory stalks retract involuntarily. They have refused to pay tribute, refused to acknowledge our supremacy, and worst of all, they laughed at our ultimatum. I perked up at that last part. Humans laughing at death threats. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and with humans, it could honestly go either way. Forgive my interruption, War Master, I said, keeping my translator set to maximum politeness. But have you actually investigated this settlement? How many humans are stationed there? Krell'vor's mandibles clacked with amusement. 1. A single human female named Maya Kovacs. She runs some kind of agricultural research station. 1 human. 1. And they were mobilizing an entire war fleet. And she laughed at you? I asked, because honestly, this story was getting better by the second. She sent a video response, Krell'vor said, his voice dripping with indignation. She was drinking some brown liquid from a container and said, and I quote, "Thanks for the giggle, big guy. Tell you what, come visit sometime. I'll make cookies. My buddy here could use the exercise." Then she turned the camera to show some kind of small earth creature, and the transmission ended. I pulled up my data pad, accessing the human species archive. Agricultural research. Dust Rim 4. Maya Kovacs. And there it was. Oh no. War Master, I said carefully. Did you happen to identify what species of creature she was referring to as her buddy? Some insignificant earth mammal. Black and white coloring. Approximately 0.5 meters in length. Clearly harmless. I scrolled through my files with growing horror. There were several earth mammals matching that description, and exactly one of them would make a Predator Lord regret every life choice that had led them to this moment. Was it perhaps tubular in shape? Stocky build? Somewhat aggressive looking? Krell'vor waved a blade arm dismissively. Irrelevant. We launched the assault at dawn. 300 warriors, full armor, plasma weapons. We will make an example of this human and her pet. I wanted to argue. I really did. But there's a saying in the Coalition. You can lead a Predator Lord to wisdom, but you can't make him think. Besides, I'd filed my official report. What happened next was technically not my problem. Technically. Still, I found myself accessing the public observation feeds for Dust Rim 4 as the Krell'thax fleet descended upon the dusty red planet. The settlement was modest, just a cluster of prefabricated buildings, some greenhouses, and what appeared to be a small garden where Maya Kovacs grew vegetables that could survive in the harsh climate. The landing was textbook perfect, which should have been the first warning sign. When things go too smoothly in a military operation, the universe is usually setting up a punchline. 300 Krell'thax warriors poured out of their dropships, weapons charged, war cries echoing across the red desert. They formed ranks, shields interlocked, moving toward the main habitat building with the coordinated precision of a species that had conquered 47 worlds. The habitat door opened. Maya Kovacs stepped out, and I got my first good look at her. She was tall for a human, with sun-weathered skin and hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. She wore simple work clothes, boots covered in red dust, and an expression that could only be described as exasperated. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, hands on her hips. "It's Sunday." "Sunday? Do you know what I do on Sundays?" "Absolutely nothing." "That's the point of Sunday." Krell'vor stepped forward, raising his primary blade arm. "Human Maya Kovacs, you have been found guilty of defiance against the Predator Lords. Prepare to, prepare to die, surrender or perish." tremble before our might. Look, I've heard the speech before. Maya yawned. Actually yawned. In the face of 300 heavily armed warriors. Here's the thing, fellas. I'm a xenobiologist. I came to this dusty rock to study extremophile bacteria in peace. I don't want trouble. I don't want conflict. I just want to do my research, drink my coffee, and occasionally video call my sister back on Earth. Then you will surrender? Krell'vor demanded. Maya's expression shifted, and suddenly I understood why humanity had earned such a complicated reputation in the galaxy. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her voice dropped to a tone that made my sensory organs tingle with alarm. I didn't say that. She whistled, short and sharp. From behind a cluster of rocks about 20 meters away, something emerged. It was indeed the creature I'd feared. Black and white markings, stocky build, moving with a rolling gait that somehow conveyed both laziness and threat. Its small eyes fixed on the assembled warriors, with what I can only describe as malicious interest. A honey badger. She had a honey badger. Gentlemen, Maya said cheerfully, meet Chaos. I paused. Wait, she actually named it Chaos? The universe had a sense of humor after all. Meet Monster, Maya corrected herself. I know. Not the most creative name. But he earned it. Monster the honey badger regarded the Krell'thax army with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for an unexpected buffet. Krell'vor laughed. A clicking, scraping sound. You expect us to fear this? This tiny mammal? Warriors, advance. The front line of Krell'thax soldiers moved forward, weapons raised. Monster yawned, displaying an impressive set of teeth, then did something I'd never seen any creature do when faced with overwhelming odds. He charged directly at them, not away, not for cover, directly at them. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for years to come, though not for the reasons the Krell'thax would have preferred. The first warrior to reach Monster swung his blade arm down in an arc that should have split the little creature in two. Monster twisted, the blade sparked off the ground, and then the honey badger was on the warrior's leg, teeth and claws working with mechanical efficiency. The warrior's howl of pain echoed across the desert. Thick skin, Maya called out helpfully. Honey badgers have incredibly thick skin. Your blade weapons? Not so effective. Also, fun fact, they don't really feel pain the way most creatures do. Something about their nervous system. And they never, ever give up. 3 more warriors converged on Monster. The honey badger dropped, rolled under a blade strike, and bit the ankle of the second warrior so hard I heard the chitin crack from the observation feed. When the third warrior tried to grab him, Monster twisted in a way that defied physics and went for the soft joint in the warrior's armor at the shoulder. Also, Maya continued, her voice taking on the tone of a lecture hall professor, they have one of the highest pain tolerance levels in Earth's animal kingdom, and they're remarkably resistant to venom, toxins, and generally anything that would kill most other creatures. 24 warriors now surrounded Monster, but the honey badger was in his element, moving like a furry blender of destruction. He climbed up one warrior's back, using armor gaps as handholds, and bit down on the back of the neck. When another warrior fired a plasma bolt, Monster simply dropped to the ground. The bolt hit the warrior he'd been climbing instead. Ooh, friendly fire, Maya winced. That's unfortunate. Krell'vor was clicking his mandibles in fury now, watching his elite forces struggle against a creature that weighed maybe 15 kilograms. All units, focus fire. Eliminate the creature. I wouldn't, Maya said. They did anyway. Plasma bolts lit up the desert. Dust exploded into the air. When it settled, there was a small crater where Monster had been standing. For about 3 seconds, the Krell'thax warriors celebrated. Then Monster erupted from a side tunnel he'd apparently dug in those 3 seconds, covered in dust and looking absolutely furious. He made a sound, somewhere between a growl and a scream, that I felt in my internal organs despite being light years away watching through a screen. Yeah, they can dig really fast too, Maya added. Forgot to mention that part. What followed was less a battle and more a masterclass in why humanity's evolutionary path had produced some truly terrifying companions. Monster moved through the Krell'thax ranks like a small, furry tornado of attitude and teeth. He went for joints, for gaps in armor, for sensitive sensory organs. He climbed warriors like trees and used them as shields against their own allies. And the entire time, Maya Kovacs stood by her habitat door, sipping from her drink container, providing commentary like she was narrating a nature documentary. There he goes for the antenna. That's going to hurt. Oh, and a bite to the secondary leg joint. Classic monster move. Notice how he's using the larger warrior as cover? He's smarter than he looks, folks. Krell'vor himself finally entered the fray, his blade arms gleaming. He was twice the size of his warriors, covered in battle scars, a veteran of countless campaigns. Monster looked at him, tilted his head, and made a decision I could read, even through the observation feed. This one looks fun. The War Master struck with speed that blurred on my screen. Monster wasn't there anymore. He'd gone low, under the strike, and his teeth found the gap in Krell'vor's leg armor. The War Master roared, kicked, and sent Monster flying about 10 meters. Most creatures would have stayed down, would have retreated, would have reassessed the situation. Monster landed, rolled, and came back for more. They have a reputation, you see, Maya said conversationally. There's videos back on Earth. Honey badgers fighting lions, fighting cobras, fighting whatever they feel like that day. There's this whole thing about them just not caring. It's become a bit of a meme. Krell'vor and Monster circled each other now, and I noticed something interesting. The War Master's warriors had stopped advancing. They were watching, some of them backing away, as their leader faced down a creature a fraction of his size. You want to know the really scary part? Maya asked, though no one had posed the question. Monster's actually being gentle right now. He hasn't deployed his secret weapon yet. Secret weapon? What secret weapon could possibly make this situation worse? Krell'vor lunged again. Monster dodged, spun, and lifted his tail. Oh no. Anal gland secretions, Maya announced with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting to share this fact. Honey badgers can spray a scent that's been described as suffocating, causes nausea, temporary blindness, and an overwhelming desire to be literally anywhere else. Monster deployed his biological warfare. The effect was immediate and devastating. Warriors in a 10-meter radius began stumbling away, their translator units broadcasting various versions of distress and disgust. Krell'vor himself staggered backward, mandibles clacking in what I can only assume was the Krell'thax equivalent of gagging. And that, Maya said, finishing her drink, is why I tried to warn you. The retreat was chaotic. 300 Krell'thax warriors scrambling back to their dropships, some of them being dragged by their comrades, all of them desperate to escape a single honey badger who watched them go with what I swear was satisfaction in his little eyes. Monster trotted back to Maya, who reached down and scratched him behind the ears. Good boy, she said. Who's a good defender of agricultural research? You are. Yes, you are. The dropships lifted off in disorder, leaving behind weapons, equipment, and what remained of the Predator Lord's dignity. I watched Krell'vor's command ship struggle into orbit, plasma scoring on its hull from where panicked warriors had fired wildly during the retreat. Maya looked up at the sky, then directly at the observation camera she somehow knew was there. Coalition observer? Yeah, I know you're watching. Tell them to send the next group with better manners. And maybe do some research first. She turned and walked back into her habitat, Monster waddling along beside her, already more interested in whatever snack awaited him inside than the army he'd just routed. I sat back in my observation chair, datapad forgotten in my gripping appendage. In 17 cycles of service, I'd seen orbital bombardments, fleet actions, planetary sieges. I'd watched mighty empires clash and ancient species wage war across star systems, but I'd never seen anything quite like this. The War Council chamber was considerably quieter when I returned the next day. Krell'vor sat alone, his blade arms folded, his eyes dim with what I recognized as embarrassment mixed with genuine confusion. Observer, he acknowledged as I entered. I suppose you've come to gloat. Actually, I came to make sure you filed your after-action report correctly, I said. The Coalition likes accurate records. How exactly does one report that an elite strike force was defeated by a single small mammal? Truthfully, I suggested. It builds character. Krell'vor made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. It was hard to tell with Krell'thax. The human was correct, he said quietly. We should have done research. What kind of species shares their world with creatures like that? That was the question, wasn't it? I pulled up my datapad again, scrolling through the files on Earth and its inhabitants. Honey badgers were just the beginning. There were videos of humans keeping creatures called dogs that ranged from tiny companions to massive beasts bred for guarding and hunting. There were cats, deceptively cute until they decided you'd outlived your usefulness. There were bears, sharks, crocodiles, and countless other apex predators that humans had somehow decided to study, photograph, and occasionally attempt to pet. A species that earned their place at the top of their food chain, I said, and apparently decided they liked some of the competition enough to make friends with them. Friends, Krell'vor repeated. That creature was her friend? Companion animal, the humans call it. They form bonds with other species. They feed them, shelter them, and in return, the animals provide companionship, protection, or in this case, an extremely effective deterrent against invasion. Krell'vor was quiet for a long moment, then asked the question I'd been expecting. What do we do now? Our honor demands we cannot simply accept this defeat. You could try apologizing, I suggested. Maybe send some kind of gift? Humans appreciate gestures of goodwill, and for the love of the Great Spiral, don't threaten them again. At least not that particular human. Because of the creature? Because honey badgers aside, she's a xenobiologist who chose to live alone on a desert planet. That level of self-sufficiency and determination? That's the human trait you should actually be worried about. As I left the chamber, I couldn't help but think about Maya Kovacs, sitting in her habitat on Dust Rim 4, probably back to studying her extremophile bacteria. Monster curled up somewhere nearby, both of them completely unbothered by the army they'd sent running. Somewhere in Coalition headquarters, someone was going to have to update the threat assessment files. Under Honey Badger, I mentally noted, they should probably just write, avoid. And under human agricultural researchers who own honey badgers, seriously, just avoid. The universe had just learned an important lesson. When a human says their buddy could use the exercise, maybe take that as a warning rather than a challenge. 3 standard weeks after what was now being called the Dust Rim Incident, or as I preferred to call it, the Great Honey Badger Humiliation, I received an encrypted message marked urgent from Coalition Command. Great. Just great. The message was brief, which in my experience meant the problem was anything but. It read, report immediately to Station Gamma 7. Situation developing with human settlement Dust Rim 4. Krell'thax involvement. Bring cultural expertise. I packed my travel kit with a sense of impending doom that had become familiar whenever humans and Predator Lords occupied the same sentence. The trip to Gamma 7 took 4 days, during which I reviewed every file I could find on Maya Kovacs and her increasingly famous companion. Turned out Monster had become something of a galactic celebrity. The combat footage had leaked, because of course it had, and now half the species in the Coalition were either terrified of Earth mammals or desperately trying to acquire their own honey badgers for defense purposes. The latter group was being firmly discouraged by Earth's Export Control Bureau, which had apparently labeled honey badgers as Class 4 restricted fauna, right up there with Komodo dragons and something called a cassowary. Station Gamma 7 was a diplomatic outpost, all gleaming metal and neutral territory, floating in space equidistant from several major civilizations. When I arrived, the docking bay was crowded with ships bearing Krell'thax military signatures. This was either going to be a peace negotiation or a complete disaster, possibly both. The conference room held an interesting collection of beings. Krell'vor sat at one end of the table, looking significantly less confident than during our last meeting. Next to him were 2 other Krell'thax I didn't recognize, their blade arms adorned with rank insignia that made my translator unit whisper, very important, in my sensory organ. At the other end sat Maya Kovacs. And Monster. The honey badger was on the table. which violated about 17 diplomatic protocols, but nobody seemed willing to mention this fact. He was eating what appeared to be some kind of fruit, making satisfied grunting noises, and occasionally glancing at the Krell'thax with eyes that promised swift violence if the fruit supply ran out. Maya looked relaxed, boots propped up on another chair, wearing the same dust-covered work clothes from the observation footage. She gave me a small wave as I entered. "Hey there, observer. Guessing you're the one who's been watching my feeds? Standard protocol for frontier settlements," I replied, taking a seat at the neutral middle position, though your situation has become decidedly non-standard. "Yeah, monster has that effect." She scratched the honey badger's head affectionately. "So what's this about? Your message said urgent diplomatic matter, but these gentlemen haven't actually explained anything yet. They've mostly just been staring at monster and sweating." "Do Krell'thax sweat?" "That's not sweat, is it?" One of the high-ranking Krell'thax, whose name translated roughly as Supreme Commander Vex'Ral, cleared his throat with a sound, like rocks grinding. "Human Kovacs, we have requested this meeting to discuss terms of reparation." Maya's eyebrows shot up. "Reparations? You attacked me." "Yes, precisely," Vex'Ral continued, and I detected something in his tone that made me suddenly very interested in where this was going. "We violated coalition law by initiating aggression against a registered research settlement. We caused damage to your property, stress to your person, and according to our legal advisors, we may have traumatized your companion animal." Monster looked up at this, fruit juice dripping from his chin, and made a noise that sounded suspiciously like laughter. The idea that this creature could be traumatized by anything short of a supernova was genuinely hilarious. Maya seemed to be thinking the same thing, because she was fighting a smile. "Monster seems fine, but go on. The Predator Lords wish to offer formal apology and compensation," Vex'Ral said stiffly. "We also wish to propose a treaty of non-aggression with your settlement." "And in exchange?" Maya asked, because she clearly understood how these things worked. Krell'vor finally spoke up, his voice carrying an emotion I hadn't heard from him before. "Respect. We want you to train our warriors." The room went very quiet. Even Monster stopped eating. "I'm sorry, what?" Maya said slowly. "Your combat tactics were extraordinary," Krell'vor explained, leaning forward. "The way you utilized terrain, psychological warfare, biological assets, and strategic withdrawal of your opponent's will to fight. We've conquered 47 worlds, and I've never seen anything like it." "I didn't do anything," Maya protested. "Monster just, did his thing." "Exactly," Vex'Ral interjected. "You bonded with a creature of immense capability and directed its natural aggression toward your enemies. This is a skill our species lacks. We have weapons, armor, tactics, but we don't have the human ability to form these partnerships with other species." I watched this exchange with growing fascination. The Predator Lords, one of the most militaristic species in the known galaxy, were asking a human agricultural researcher to teach them about interspecies cooperation. The irony was so thick you could serve it with a spoon. Maya looked down at Monster, who had resumed eating his fruit. "You want me to teach you how to make friends with animals? We want you to teach us how to survive against enemies who employ such tactics," Krell'vor said. "Because if there's one human with one honey badger, there are certainly more, and we would rather not repeat the dust rim incident on a larger scale." Smart thinking, I had to admit. The Krell'thax were warriors, but they weren't stupid. They'd just learned that humanity's alliance with their own planet's fauna created combat variables that traditional military doctrine hadn't accounted for. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the table. Monster finished his fruit and wandered over to her, climbing into her lap and settling down like a furry, dangerous house cat. "Okay," she said finally. "Here's my counteroffer. I'm not a military trainer, and I'm not leaving my research, but I'll consult. Remote. On my schedule. You send me scenarios, I tell you what would happen if a human was involved. And maybe, I can put you in touch with some actual Earth wildlife experts who could explain why trying to fight creatures from our planet is generally a bad idea." "Acceptable," Vex'Ral said immediately. "And, Maya continued, holding up a finger. You fund my research. Fully. For the next 10 cycles. Plus hazard pay for the whole invasion thing. Also acceptable. And you have to tell me how you got here so fast. I'm on the edge of map space. You mobilized 300 warriors and a fleet in, 5 days? That's some seriously impressive logistics. Krell'vor's mandibles clacked with what might have been embarrassment. We've had ships in this sector for 2 months. We've been attempting to establish dominance over the frontier settlements. How's that working out for you? Maya asked with a grin. Until we encountered you. Quite well, actually, Vex'ral admitted. 17 settlements have accepted our protection, in exchange for tribute. My sensory organs perked up at that. Protection? From what? And the mood in the room shifted, becoming heavier. Vex'ral exchanged glances with his subordinates before speaking. There have been attacks. Raiders, we think, but not like any we've encountered before. They hit fast, take supplies and technology, and disappear before anyone can respond. 3 settlements have gone completely dark in the last month. This was new information, and it explained why Coalition Command had sent me here with such urgency. Raiders were one thing, but raiders capable of making Krell'thax nervous were something else entirely. And you think these raiders might try to hit my settlement? Maya asked, her casual tone evaporating. Your location is isolated. Your defenses appeared minimal before we learned otherwise. And you have advanced research equipment, Krell'vor said. You matched the profile of previous targets perfectly. Monster raised his head from Maya's lap, his small eyes suddenly alert. It was like he could sense the shift in atmosphere. The way the conversation had moved from negotiation to genuine threat assessment. Maya's hand automatically moved to stroke Monster's fur, a gesture that seemed to calm both of them. Okay, so let me get this straight. You attacked me to establish dominance, got your tails handed to you by my buddy here, and now you're offering protection from raiders who are apparently scary enough to worry Predator Lords. Essentially, yes, Vex'ral confirmed. And what do you get out of this besides my consulting services? Krell'vor leaned back, and I saw something in his posture that looked almost like a smile. We get to say we're allied with the human who defeated 300 of our warriors with a single animal. That reputation has value, especially if these raiders are monitoring Coalition communications. Maya laughed, actually laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that held both amusement and understanding. You want to use me as a scarecrow, a keep-away sign for the bad guys. Deterrent is the term we prefer, Vex'ral said. But yes, I watched this negotiation unfold with the kind of professional appreciation one develops after years in diplomatic service. The Krell'thax were turning their defeat into a strategic advantage, and Maya was savvy enough to recognize it while extracting maximum benefit for herself. Fine, Maya said. But I have conditions beyond what I already stated. 1. You don't station warriors on my planet. I like my privacy. 2. You provide me with full intelligence on these raiders. Everything you know. 3. If they do show up, you respond within 1 hour, not 1 day, not 1 week, 1 hour. The nearest Krell'thax patrol route is 4 hours away at maximum velocity, Krell'vor said. Then, I suggest you adjust your patrol routes, Maya replied flatly. Because if raiders show up and you're not here in time, I'm going to be very unhappy. And you've seen what happens when I'm unhappy. Monster chose that moment to yawn, displaying his impressive teeth, and I swear every Krell'thax in the room flinched. We can position a rapid response team 2 hours away, Vex'ral offered. Cloaked patrol vessel, full combat loadout, jump capable. 90 minutes, Maya countered. Acceptable. They shook on it, which involved Maya extending her hand and Vex'ral carefully touching it with the flat of his blade arm, creating what I'm fairly certain was the first human Krell'thax diplomatic handshake in recorded history. As the formal negotiations concluded and documents were signed, I found myself sitting next to Maya while the Krell'thax conferred in the corner about deployment logistics. You handled that well, I told her. I used to negotiate research grants with university administrators, she said. After that, negotiating with warrior aliens is actually pretty straightforward. They're more honest about what they want. Monster had left her lap and was now investigating the refreshment table, sniffing at various items with clear suspicion. One of the junior Krell'thax warriors watched him nervously, blade arm twitching every time the honey badger got close. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Off the record?" "Sure. Why stay out here? You're clearly intelligent, capable, and now you're going to be wealthy from this contract. You could do your research anywhere. Why Dust Rim 4? Maya was quiet for a moment, watching Monster reject a piece of fruit that apparently didn't meet his standards. "You know what the problem with most of the galaxy is, Observer? Too many people, too many voices, too much noise. Out here, it's just me, my work, and Monster. When I look up at night, I can see stars that nobody's named yet. When I make a discovery, it's mine alone until I decide to share it. Lonely, though," I observed. "Solitary," she corrected. "There's a difference. Lonely is wanting company and not having it. Solitary is choosing your own company carefully." She nodded toward Monster. "I've got the best company I could ask for." As if understanding he was being discussed, Monster returned to Maya's side, carrying what appeared to be an entire tray of refreshments he'd somehow acquired. Where he planned to put all that food in his small body was a mystery of physics I didn't want to contemplate. The meeting concluded with remarkable efficiency after that. The Krell'thax agreed to all of Maya's terms, transferred the first payment for her research funding immediately, and promised to have the rapid response team in position within 48 hours. As everyone prepared to leave, Krell'vor approached Maya one final time. "Human Kovacs," he said formally. "I underestimated you, and it cost me the respect of my warriors. Some would seek revenge for such humiliation." Maya met his gaze steadily. "But you're not some. You're smart enough to turn a loss into an advantage." "I wanted you to know," Krell'vor continued, "that I researched Earth after our encounter. Your planet is remarkable. So many predators, so many dangerous creatures, and yet your species not only survived but thrived. You didn't do it by being the strongest or the fastest. We did it by being adaptable," Maya finished. "And by making friends with the wolves that could have eaten us." "Just so," Krell'vor agreed. "Perhaps that's a lesson the Predator Lords needed to learn. Strength alone doesn't guarantee survival." They parted with mutual respect, which was more than I'd expected when I'd first arrived at the station. As Maya's transport prepared for departure back to Dust Rim 4, I filed my report with Coalition Command, summarizing the agreement and the new strategic arrangement. But I also added a personal note, something that went beyond official observations. The Krell'thax had learned an important lesson about humanity, but I suspected there was a larger pattern here. Humans didn't conquer through overwhelming force. They adapted, they befriended, they found unexpected solutions to problems that would stump more rigid species, and they brought their friends along for the ride. 2 months passed quietly. The Krell'thax Rapid Response Team maintained their position, a silent guardian that never needed to be called. Maya's research continued, yielding 3 significant papers on extremophile bacteria that were already generating excitement in academic circles. Monster, according to her regular reports, remained Monster. He'd expanded his territory to include a nearby rock formation, where he'd discovered a colony of small burrowing creatures. The creatures had, wisely, decided to relocate rather than contest ownership. Then, on a quiet Tuesday equivalent, everything changed. The distress signal from Dust Rim 4 came through on every emergency channel simultaneously, which meant it was either catastrophically important or someone had made a terrible mistake with the broadcast settings. It was the former. I pulled up the feed to find Maya's face, calm but serious, with sounds of plasma fire in the background. "This is Kovacs on Dust Rim 4 to any Coalition or Krell'thax vessels in range. We have hostile contacts. 3 ships, unknown configuration, currently attempting to breach my habitat shields. They've already disabled my communication relay, so if you're seeing this, it's because my backup system is still functional. Monster and I are secure for now, but these guys brought serious hardware." The feed shook as an explosion rocked the settlement. Raiders matched the description from previous attacks. "They're jamming my systems and demanding I surrender my research data." I've told them no in several creative ways. They seem unimpressed. Another explosion, closer this time. Krell'thax rapid response. If you're listening, now would be a really good time for that 90-minute response window to kick in. Monster's getting restless, and you know how he gets when he's restless. The feed cut to external cameras, showing 3 sleek vessels hovering over the settlement. They were firing methodically at the habitat shields, which were holding but showing stress fractures in the energy field. I immediately contacted the Krell'thax patrol. Already en route, came the response. 87 minutes out at maximum burn. Can she hold? I looked at the shield readings. Negative. She's got maybe 40 minutes before catastrophic failure. There was a pause. Then Krell'vor's voice came through. Tell the human to release Monster. What? You heard me, observer. Tell her to let Monster outside the shields. These raiders have never encountered a honey badger. Let's educate them. I relayed the message to Maya, half expecting her to refuse. Instead, her laugh came through the communication channel. Monster heard you, and he approves. Opening external airlock now. On the external cameras, I watched as a small access port opened in the habitat's lower level. Monster emerged, looked up at the 3 raider ships, and made a decision that would shortly ruin several beings' entire day. He couldn't fly, obviously, but honey badgers were exceptional climbers. The nearest raider ship had extended a landing strut to stabilize their firing position, and Monster went up it like a furry missile with claws. Oh, they're definitely going to regret that landing configuration, Maya observed calmly. Monster reached the ship's hull and began doing what honey badgers do best, which was finding the weakest point and exploiting it with extreme prejudice. He tore at panel seams, bit through exposed cables, and generally created havoc in a way that no ship designer had ever planned for. The raider ship began listing to one side as systems failed. Through the communication intercepts, I could hear confused shouting in a language my translator struggled with. Something about a demon and structural damage. Demon badger, Maya said with satisfaction. I like that. Monster, you've been promoted to demon. The raiders tried to shake him off by maneuvering the ship, but this only gave Monster access to new areas to destroy. He disappeared into an access hatch, and moments later, the ship's weapons went offline. The second raider ship made the mistake of trying to help, coming in close to provide covering fire. Monster leaped from one ship to the other, a gap of at least 10 meters, landed on the second ship's hull, and immediately began the destruction process again. Honey badgers can fall from significant heights without injury, Maya narrated, back in her nature documentary voice. Their loose skin and thick fur provide exceptional protection. Also, they have absolutely no sense of self-preservation when angry. The third raider ship, displaying more intelligence than its companions, began to retreat. Monster watched it go with what I could only interpret as disappointment, then returned his attention to the 2 damaged vessels. By the time the Krell'thax rapid response team arrived, 84 minutes after the initial alert, both raider ships had crashed in controlled descents, their crews evacuating in escape pods and fleeing at maximum speed. Monster stood atop one of the wrecked ships, covered in hydraulic fluid and electrical components, making triumphant grunting noises. The Krell'thax warriors secured the area, captured the few raiders who hadn't managed to escape, and set up a defensive perimeter. Krell'vor himself landed to personally check on Maya. Human Kovacs, are you harmed? Couple of bumps from when the shields took hits, but I'm fine, Maya replied, emerging from her habitat. Monster did most of the work. Again. So I observed, Krell'vor said, his tone carrying what I now recognized as admiration. Your companion is truly formidable. Monster, hearing his name, trotted over and sat at Maya's feet, looking extraordinarily pleased with himself. Maya produced a treat from her pocket, which Monster accepted as his rightful due. You know, Maya said thoughtfully, I'm starting to think you folks might be onto something with this whole alliance idea. Monster could use the exercise more regularly, and these raiders seem to provide excellent enrichment opportunities. Krell'vor's mandibles clicked with amusement. Are you proposing a more formal arrangement? Maybe. How do you feel about humanity joining your little protection racket? We provide expertise in unconventional warfare. You provide the muscle and the rapid response teams. Everyone benefits. I would need to consult with the High Command, Krell'vor said. But I could tell he was already considering it. But I suspect they would be very interested in such a partnership. As I watched this conversation unfold, I realized I was witnessing something historic. Not just a treaty between species, but the beginning of a new kind of alliance in the galaxy. One based not on dominance or submission, but on mutual respect and complementary strengths. The Krell'thax had strength in numbers, humans had adaptability and unexpected allies. Together, they might actually create something stable in the chaotic frontier. 3 days later, I stood in the Coalition Council chambers, presenting my final report on what was now being called the Dust Rim Alliance. The council members listened with varying degrees of interest and skepticism as I outlined how a single human researcher and her honey badger had fundamentally altered the power dynamics of the frontier settlements. "This is unprecedented," said the Vrelnian representative, her voice translator buzzing with confusion. "A military alliance based on the combat capabilities of a domesticated animal? Monster's not exactly domesticated," I corrected. "He's more of a willing participant in Maya's life who happens to be extremely effective at defending her interests." "Regardless," the Vrelnian continued, "this sets a concerning precedent. If other species begin weaponizing their companion animals, they've been doing that for thousands of cycles," I interrupted. "Humans domesticated wolves into dogs over 10,000 Earth years ago. They've been partnering with animals for hunting, protection, and companionship since before most species in this chamber achieved spaceflight. We're not witnessing something new, we're just finally paying attention to it." The council debated for hours, but ultimately approved the Dust Rim Alliance as a legitimate defensive partnership. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive enough. As I left the chambers, I received a message from Maya. It was a simple video, showing her and Monster sitting outside her habitat at sunset, the red dust of Dust Rim 4 turning golden in the fading light. "Hey observer," she said to the camera. "Krell'vor tells me the alliance is official now. Thought you'd like to know that Monster and I are settling in fine with our new security arrangement. The Krell'thax even built us a proper defense perimeter, though honestly, I think Monster's reputation is doing most of the heavy lifting." Monster appeared in frame, dragging something that looked suspiciously like a Krell'thax practice dummy. He'd apparently claimed it as a toy. "Thanks for the support through all this," Maya continued. "It's not every day an agricultural researcher becomes a key military asset, though between you and me, I'm still mostly interested in my bacteria. The whole Galactic Alliance thing is just a side gig." She smiled, waved, and the message ended. I filed it in my personal archives, a reminder that sometimes the most significant changes in the galaxy don't come from grand strategies or massive fleets. Sometimes they come from one determined human, her improbable companion, and a willingness to stand their ground when 300 warriors come knocking. The Predator Lords had declared war, thinking they'd found easy prey. Instead, they'd found a partner, and Monster had found a whole galaxy full of new friends to terrify. Somewhere out in the frontier, I knew Maya Kovacs was back to studying her extremophile bacteria. Monster was probably napping in a sunbeam, and the Krell'thax Rapid Response Team was maintaining their vigilant watch. The universe had learned an important lesson. When humans say don't step back, they mean it. And when they bring a honey badger to the negotiation, you should probably just start with the apology and skip straight to the alliance.